Well, welcome to the audiovisual series of the International College of Dentists. We're delighted today to have with us Dr. Israel Boris Bender. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about him. Many know him as Dr. I.B. Bender. He's a world-renowned scientist, clinician, academician, and researcher, and I'm really pleased to be with you, Dr. Bender.
Thank you.
Currently, among many of his activities, he is Emeritus Professor of Endodontics at the University of Pennsylvania School of Dental Medicine, Chairman Emeritus, Department of Dentistry at the Albert Einstein Medical Center, and advisor to the Journal of Endodontics. And today we'll have the opportunity to learn from him more about him and from him, how he shaped dentistry and health and the world we live in, and what he sees that the future will bring to us. And so I'm really pleased to be with you here, Dr. Bender, and I'd like to learn a little bit about your origins. I know you were born in Uman, Russia, and could you tell me a little bit about your family there and how you came to come to the United States?
Well, that's a long story, but I'll try to crystallize it in as short a time as possible. I was born in 1905 in the city of Uman, which is now the Ukraine. And I was born in the midst of a pogrom.
Oh, my.
My mother was running away from the city to get away from the pogrom. She delivered me in the railroad station. And in the process of delivery, she was holding on to my older brother, who was 18 months older than I, or 16 months older, in the process of the delivery. So that's my birth at the time of the Tsarist regime and the time of Rasputin. And the political climate was not very conducive, especially for the Jewish people. And there was no free education at all. The entrance to the universities was restricted in that they only allowed 10% of the Jews to be able to enter. And so most of the Jewish kids that wanted to go to university had to have a predilection for learning and had to be pretty smart. And since there was no free education, you had to get private tutors. And my brother, who was then about age 10, he was tutored in mathematics, French, German, Russian grammar, Russian history. And he took the competitive examination.
Were you tutored with him?
No. He was the eldest one, so the eldest one usually got all the favors. I learned by myself. For example, if I wanted to learn how to write, I would see how it's written and so forth, and I would ask my aunts and my mother, what's this letter, what's this letter? So I was self-taught. And I learned mathematics by handling coins, like the kopecks and groschen. A groschen was a tenth of a cent, or a tenth of a kopeck. And I would soon learn how much it was and so forth when I went to the candy store to buy candy.
That was the most important use of them.
Anyway, that's how I learned. But anyway, my brother didn't make the 10%. And my mother's great ambition was for us to go to the university. I was supposed to be going in to be a physician, and my brother was supposed to be going in for engineering. And since my brother didn't make the 10%, as I said, my mother wasn't to be deterred. She began to look around, and she found out that in America, education is free, and there's no restriction. And so she decided she was going to go to America.
So the pursuit of education was the driving force.
Right. And so that's why we came here.
Oh, that's amazing. Where did you come when you came, and how old were you?
I was 9.5. I came 2 months before the First World War, April of 1914. And so by the grace of God go I. Otherwise, the students here would have to read my Russian writings. So,
where did you come to when you came to the States?
I came to Philadelphia.
The whole family came together at the same time?
Yeah, my mother, brother, and I. My father came a year before.
And was that the custom, the father coming
first,
before?
Establishing himself and so forth. And then we became Americans.
Well, what did your father do?
My father was a cantor, and he studied voice culture at the Voice Institute in Vienna. And as I mentioned to you before, one of the visiting professors that he had was a world-famous tenor, Enrico Caruso. And he told me a very interesting story about Caruso, that when he would take a high C, the windows would rattle. And I didn't believe it until I saw the ad on the TV, Memorex ad, where the glass would break.
That's right.
So that's how we started. And of course, we went through the school system, and both my brother and I sold newspapers to pay our way through school. And that's the way we went through high school, college, and dental school. And then after a while, my brother used to work in the post office. And he would, medical school would finish at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. He would run down, have something to eat, and work in the post office till 2 o'clock in the morning.
I understand that you loved opera, well, growing up, and still do now.
Well, I do, because I was exposed to it. As I said, our background, that is my father's background. He would listen to all these records, and my mother was very much interested in music. And so I became an opera buff. I still am.
Well, I saw that from your CV that you went to the University of Pennsylvania for a year before you started dental school.
Yeah.
Was that the usual custom at that time?
Well, you had to have when I started the school, I was the last class that was admitted on 1 year pre-dental. And then after my class, you had to have 2 or 3 years of pre-dental education. And so I was, as I mentioned, I went to college at the University of Pennsylvania for 1 year. And then the following year, I was admitted to dental school.
What was dental school like at that time?
Horrible.
Horrible? Well, tell me a little bit about it.
Well, the teaching in dental school, and for that matter, most schools, was by authority. What you couldn't explain, or what the professor couldn't explain, or the instructor couldn't explain, you had to believe what he said. they did not teach by inquiry, which is the better way of learning anyway. But it was all anecdotal, dogma. And it was hard for me to accept because I always challenged why this happens and so forth. And I'd like to mention the fact that asking the question why has led to a great number of discoveries in the field of science particularly. Take, for example, everybody saw the apple fall from the tree, but only Sir Isaac Newton asked why. And now we have interplanetary travel.
Right.
And then, of course, the other person that asked the question why was Jenner, the father of immunology. Mm-hmm. He noticed that the cowmaids never developed smallpox. And he asked the question why. And he was the one that gave the first vaccination of smallpox to an 8-year-old kid.
Well, you persevered, even in that environment that you said was so structured. You were able to keep those questions coming and persevere.
All the time. And that's why I guess I was responsible to introduce the biologic aspects of the pulp and also of endodontics. Prior to that, it was all mechanistic.
Were there any people that influenced you at that very early stage while you were still in dental school and around that time?
I was influenced by a Professor Schlainer in my sophomore year at high school. Mm. And I was also influenced by Dr. Appleton, who was chairman of the bacteriology department at dental school, who had a scientific approach to it. There were a lot of things, that subsequently he wasn't up on stuff, but considering the changes that were going on, he had a direct influence on me to use the scientific approach.
Why did you choose dentistry? You told me your mother had the vision of medicine for you.
Well, as I said before, my mother wanted me to be a physician and my brother to be an engineer. And my first year in college, I took the pre-med course. And then I had a friend of mine who had just finished his first year in dental school, and he was telling me all about these courses that he was getting, physiology and anatomy and pharmacology and so forth. And I always looked upon his dentistry as something mechanistic. And so we didn't have much money, notwithstanding the fact that when I went to dental school, the tuition was $125 a semester. When I look at it now, it's $37,000. That's obscene. But in any event, I chose dentistry because medicine required 3 years pre-med.
Oh, I see.
Dentistry was only 1 year, and I was the last class to have the 1 year pre. And I figured I can't afford that, and since I would be getting these subjects, I went for dentistry. And
so did you?
My tilt was always towards the medical side of dentistry, less of the mechanistic side.
So with that tilt, you had started saying your interest in the medical and the underlying mechanisms.
In other words, when oral medicine was introduced, it was just like coming home.
Well, you were there in the beginning in creating the oral medicine aspects.
I also, after dental school, I felt that my training was inadequate. I couldn't think in terms of myself going in and starting to work on patients.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to take a dental internship at the old Jewish hospital, which then subsequently became the Albert Einstein Medical Center.
Oh,
that's how
that is the beginnings there,
right.
and how
and
you continued on.
There I learned the importance of medicine, in that the most important individual in a hospital is the patient. Everything is geared for the patient. And then in retrospect, I felt that the most important individual in a school should be the student, not the professor, not the teacher. The student. That's what the schools are built for students. And this is where it's still lacking, that concept. That
the focus on the student.
The focus is on the student.
Well, one of the things, I had a chance, an opportunity to read what you gave me, the wonderful tribute the Journal of Endodontics gave in 1997. And some of the quotes there I thought were terrific. Steve Montgomery said, IB was a uniquely successful teacher because he believed that learning should be fun and that people learn better in a pleasant environment. There was frequent laughter in his classroom. Could you tell me about your philosophy of teaching?
Teaching with humor is long remembered. However, there are exceptions to the rule, because quite frequently now when I go someplace and some student comes back to me and that he hasn't been with me for the last 20 years or so, he says, hey, what's that joke you told? He remembered that, but he didn't remember the concept. But in any event, it was very, very nice. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you one of the jokes that I tell, and that is about this priest who had a couple of parrots that he trained how to pray. All they did was pray. And in the same town, there was a young man, a bachelor, that had a parrot that constantly swore and used foul language. And whenever he brought somebody into his apartment, the parrot would start swearing, and he was embarrassed. So he thought if he would go to this priest and ask him if he could get his parrot in with the priest's parrot, maybe he'll teach this parrot, who was a female, how to pray instead of swear. And the two parrots that the priest had were males. And when he came to the priest and he confronted him with his problem, the priest said, no, I don't think it'll work out, because you see, yours is a female parrot, and these are male parrots. So what do you got to do? They create a commotion. I said, well, look, let's put her in. If it creates a commotion, we'll take her out. So he does, and pretty soon one of the male parrots says to the other, hey, we can stop praying now. Our prayers have been answered. So
well,
it's jokes like that which take the edge off, and I don't like this business of the professor being up here and the student down here. I always like it on an even basis. So,
well, there was another quote that I really liked that Dan Green had said. And he said, where does he find the vitality, the energy, and the enthusiasm? And the question is rhetorical, he says. He gets his energy from us, and we from him. We're all his students, and our lives will never be the same. And I think, and I mean, you must have that secret of mentorship, and you must have gained that from others that mentored you.
No, I'll be frank with you. Nobody.
Nobody mentored you towards that end. It came naturally.
Right. Exactly. I can't. All these things that I attempted and so forth, it was just from lying in bed and reflecting.
And listening.
And listening and seeing what other people do, how they do it, how badly they do it. Mm-hmm. And so it was a constant reevaluation. And I felt that many of the concepts that we had in dentistry or in biology need reevaluation, change, and so forth, like asking the questions why and so forth.
Keep asking that why question. You're one of the members of the founding group of the endodontic specialty, and endodontics is the youngest specialty to be added to dentistry. Could you tell me a little bit about those very special days in Chicago in 1943?
Our first meeting was in Chicago in 1943, and I couldn't understand how these people coming to Chicago, 21 of us coming to Chicago and thinking about teeth, when we were in the midst of a World War. And I felt, well, I guess they must have something that they want to express. One of the things that I was struck with is the fact that I was able to put a face on the name of the people that I had read about and so forth. And they were very fascinating. And so we always had our meetings in Chicago in the dead of winter. And there's nothing worse than Chicago in the wintertime. And we formulated our program there, and we grew from 21 founders to now approximately, I would say, about 3,600 members.
3,600 members.
About that.
It took 20 years from 1943 before the specialty was officially recognized.
Yeah, and that also was a struggle. And I think the one that is most responsible for that was my friend Jake Friedland from Charlotte, North Carolina. I like the way he says things, not so much what he says, but how he says it. And he was able to capture the spirit of it, and he was able to get it through the House of Representatives or the ADA to get our specialty. And there, too, it was based on people with a background of anecdotal information. And I had a hard time changing things because I was looked upon as a pariah. And finally, I introduced the biologic aspects with publications and results and so forth. I did a lot of work on bacteremias following extraction of the teeth and also following endodontic procedures. I introduced more or less the medical side to it because, after all, the mouth is part of the total organ. And so...
well, this was a critical part of any specialty. It had to have a unique knowledge base.
I tried to demonstrate to the importance of basic science with clinical correlation. And that's what I was able to introduce into endodontics, and that's why I'm looked upon as the legend.
The legend.
The living legend.
Well, I noticed in looking at your CV that even though you were one of the earliest research grantees of the National Institute of Dental Research, your research started about 17 years earlier than that.
Oh, yeah.
And your grant number was 495, which meant it was the 495th application to
Oh, I didn't know
NIDR.
that. I
Yes.
didn't know that.
So it was impressive. I was able to follow through. What was it like writing grants in those days?
Tough.
As tough as today?
Well, today I think it's tougher.
Tougher?
Because a lot of other things came up, you know. But I just did it blindly. I had no idea how to do it. I just answered the questions and so forth. And I was able to get it. I think I got it not so much as to how I made out the grant as is the topic, the importance of that topic, to pursue it. And my findings, I had a heck of a time with the American Heart Association. They were just as bad as the American Dental Association.
In pursuing some of these early ones.
Because I was trying to tell them that the bacteria comes from the gingival sulcus. Why not attack it there, the bacteria? Whereas the American Heart Association, they were attacking the bacteria after it gets into the bloodstream.
With their antibiotic coverage, right.
So I said, let's destroy the bacteria here first, and then, of course, have the antibiotic given parenterally later, you know, together.
Well, you had, I have some titles of your early grants. Relationship of endodontic treatment to bacteremia, like you said, $9,890. And then endodontic treatment to transient bacteremia. And then the interrelationship of pulp and periodontal disease as well. These were really seminal events. I mean, they were really in introducing, as you said, that interaction between oral health, oral infections, and systemic disease.
Right.
You had some very strong and powerful partners and collaborators in your research. Could you tell me about them as well?
Well, the one that I did most of my work with was Dr. Samuel Seltzer, and both of us had written the text, The Dental Pulp, which was translated into Russian, Japanese, Spanish, Portuguese. And we did a lot of work together. And we lectured together. And whenever we were invited, if I was invited to give a lecture, it was always with him. And so we were known as the bookends of pulp biology. And I did some of the initial bacteremia work with a Dr. Pressman, who was a physician. And he took his graduate work. He was interested in cardiology. He did his graduate work at the University of Pennsylvania. And he became interested in bacteremia. So he asked me if I would do the work with him. And since I was interested in it made it very good. And the first paper that I wrote was in a medical journal. It was, I can't think of the name offhand, Archives of Internal Medicine.
Right.
A very prestigious journal, and that's where we did our, as a matter of fact, we did our initial work with what was the named that drug before, sulfanilamide. That was the first
one
that we did. The antibiotics came later, but our work was with sulfanilamide. And we did it with statistical analysis and so forth and so on, which at that time very few investigators used the statistical analysis to
look at relationships.
Well, to justify that it's not a placebo effect.
Right. The design of the study was key to answering the question you were posing.
That it was due to the drug and not to anything else.
Well, I wanted to get back to the specialty of endodontics since you just came back, you said, from the annual meeting in Israel.
Yeah.
Has it met your expectations, the specialty as it is today?
Well, I think that it's getting better and better, and I think that it will be, our organization would be better served if we would support PhD programs. In other words, if an individual decides in endodontics and he decides to take graduate training, we ought to support a scholarship for a PhD program. We have developed an endowment foundation which in our organization, which was really created by my friend Jake Friedland. And we now have, we're now going for $10 million to help in education. And I think that the monies that they're using where they support the student to do a little piece of research, give them the experience and so forth, I think it's a waste of money. What that really does is it massages the ego of the chairman that supports the student. I think we'd be better served if we had the monies set aside for somebody who's going to take a PhD. It is the people with the PhDs that will be able to find the discoveries or the developments that we need for progress. And we don't have, in our specialty, we don't have too many PhDs. And those that we have really, really made contributions as far as development is concerned.
And one of the areas now that's getting a lot of visibility is clinical research. So partnering the clinicians with the PhD researchers would be important.
Well, clinical correlation.
Correlations, right.
That's the point. The findings that they have answer some of the clinical problems. That's why I believe that we need people with good biologic background. And it's not like years ago, you know. Nothing. So somebody said, well, you did all right. I said, but just imagine how much more I could do if I had the PhD.
Well, you were showing the way at that time. I have a quote from your article, The Past, Present, and Future of Endodontics, which was your special lecture, actually published in the Australian Endodontics newsletter. And Jack Harrison referred to this as his favorite Benderism. And the quote is, "The clinical practice of yesterday's endodontics becomes the heresy of tomorrow and of today. Excuse me. And today's endodontic practice becomes the heresy of tomorrow." So don't be rigid in your techniques or beliefs.
That's the idea. That's exactly the point, because when you reevaluate and when you start thinking in the future, you have to not be rigid, because if you're rigid, you're going to prevent other people from developing new concepts.
And it's that flexibility that's hard when you are in a practice mode and you have been practicing
Yeah,
and
that's
things work for
very
you
difficult.
in a certain way.
But on the other hand, if you have a concept and you change the technique, you can change very easily. But if you're just strictly a technician and the technique changes, you don't know why you're doing it,
You don't know which way.
and which way to go. So I feel that they ought to have or should have a strong biologic background. So any changes that came, you can adapt.
Well, it gives you that mobility, like you said, and the exploration that's needed.
Yeah, that's why one of the funny things that I also state in that article is that I'm responsible more or less with others to move the endodontics from the outhouse to the penthouse.
I heard that too. I like that quote.
So,
Well, you can see a lot from a penthouse that you can't see from an outhouse.
well, it's a little better and it smells better.
You've received a lot of recognitions and awards. They range from the honorable mention for the Benjamin Lord Prize for the First District Dental Society in New York in 1937 to becoming an honorary member of the Thailand Endodontic Society in 1995. And as I mentioned earlier, the January 1997 issue of the Journal of Endodontics was dedicated to you and all your achievements. And also you've had recognitions all over the world, you know, Peru and France, Israel. Why don't you tell me a little bit about these wonderful awards and recognitions?
I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, it was given to me.
Did any mean any more to you than
No.
others?
Didn't mean anything more. I thought that for the time being it was very nice. I mean, in the sense that it's recognition, but I'm not interested in the award business. So I feel that if they adopt some of my teachings, I think that's more rewarding then I feel that I've made a contribution.
Well, I think a reward is a reflection of the organization's appreciation to someone for
that's
what
right.
they have done for them.
Yeah, but I never sought.
Right.
It came. So they want to give it to me, fine.
Well, Jake Friedland, who you've mentioned several times, has said, if you have any curiosity about what one man can do, let me suggest that you write to I.B. Bender and request a copy of his curriculum vitae. And that's true because when you take a look at your career from dental school on, you didn't miss a moment in pursuing the question of why. And you still are doing that now.
Yep, still doing it.
If you were to start your career today, what would you move into? Which special questions would you be asking?
The question, why?
And why in which area?
Well, when you ask a question, you try to answer why, you're in the field of research.
I read the article that you had also in that special journal where you were looking at the evidence that can be garnered from radiographs and the limitations in being able to assess bone. And there's a lot of questions being asked about the diagnostic capacity of oral bone loss and osteoporosis. What do you think we should do there to keep pursuing that diagnostic potential?
Oh, study radioactive materials and so forth. That was more or less trying to answer the question why you have a molar tooth, lower first molar, the pulp is necrotic, the mesial root shows an area of rarefaction, and the distal root does not. So I said, why? Then I began to study it and so forth, and I got the reason why. Because it's near, the mesial root is near the cortical bone. The cortical bone has more calcium per unit of volume than cancellous bone. So the distal root also has an area, but you can't see it because the destruction of the cancellous bone doesn't show up as well. It doesn't create the contrast. But if you leave it long enough, you'll see the distal root also involved. But it takes a longer period of time. And so it is the position of the apices as in relationship to the cortical bone that is the reason why you have variations in the different teeth, although they're all infected.
Well, it's the limitations of our imaging capacity.
Right.
No, you have, as I have looked at your papers that you've published and the work that you've done, and think about the opportunities we see today, you've pursued these all along. You've spoken to physicians. You've told them what needs to be done.
The physicians are no smarter than dentists, you see. They also need to be poked a little bit. For example, I had this with this bone business. I wrote an article on Gaucher's disease.
Oh, you have to tell me a little bit more about that.
That's a hereditary disease. Most of it only by the Ashkenazi Jews. The Ashkenazis are the Eastern European Jews, whereas the Sephardic Jews are in the Portugal and Spain, northern Africa, and they don't suffer from that. So it's a strictly hereditary characteristic. And this young gal came into my office, and what I noticed was osteoporotic lesions or areas of rarefaction in the molar and premolar areas. And again, why? These are vital teeth. And so I got to her records and so forth, and I went to the hospital where she was hospitalized, and I found out that she had Gaucher's disease. And she became a patient of mine. And then I saw that there were increased changes 20 years later. So I reported that. And then they now had developed a replacement therapy whereby they take the afterbirths, the placental tissue, and they squeeze it out or macerate it or treat it and so forth, and they get the enzyme out of it. And they inject it into these patients, and they get much better clinically. But the bone, it depends how much destruction took place. If it's not too much, then the bone recovers also. But what I noticed was that when she was getting this replacement therapy, she has some teeth extracted. And in those areas, with the replacement therapy, healing started to take place. So I figured, I guess what it needs is some stimulation of some sort or reduce the pressure of some sort, and it got better. And then I had a 60-year follow-up.
I thought that was amazing. 60 years with the same patient.
And just about a month ago, she died. I went to her funeral. She was very cooperative. And,
I know you had written about her then 3 times over the course of her lifespan and your clinical care.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
And they did some beautiful work in that area. And I thought that was, incidentally, it's the most expensive drug in existence.
That is being used
for a
now.
one-year treatment that would cost $300,000. Fortunately, the government supplied that.
Yeah, those are the kind of treatments we're seeing now, and they are ones that obviously are the future of treatment.
Exactly.
But the costs
That's
are
exactly
amazing.
the point.
Yeah.
See, there's the biochemistry.
Understanding all of the different enzymes that are needed.
Yeah, and this last article that I had written in December '97, I had written periapical replacement resorption following orthodontic movement in vital teeth, normal teeth, and endodontically treated teeth. And what I noticed, one of my students asked me the question, why? Mm-hmm. Why is it that the normal tooth, the apex resorbs, but the endodontically treated tooth does not? Am I too long?
No, go ahead.
Continue? Anyway, so I tried to make an analysis of it, and I began to learn things about orthodontics, which I never knew. And they had some explanations which were very poor, I couldn't accept. And then I studied some of the neuropeptides that came out, and there's a woman, PhD, from the University of Washington on the Pacific Coast, from the Washington State. And she had, I call her the queen of neuropeptides. And she did a tremendous amount of work with this. And I felt that the pulp has tremendous amount of neuropeptides. And if you extirpate the pulp,
you remove them.
There are no neuropeptides. And so I tried to explain it on that basis. So I had a very interesting time with that.
So you're stimulating and catalyzing a whole new series of questions as a result.
And besides which, you see, when you do the apply orthodontic forces, the apex resorbs only apically. And after you stop the forces, the resorption stops. However...
So it's in the movement.
Yeah, whatever, the forces of the movement. And it's not the heavy movement, it's mild movement too. It's unpredictable. It occurs in about 19 to 31% of the time. And then I have to examine, for instance, the teeth that, because of pulpal infection, they have apical root resorptions. You have an area of rarefaction. And the interesting thing is when you do an endodontic treatment and you remove the infection, the apex of that tooth is reconstituted. But the orthodontically treated tooth is never reconstituted. Right. Now, why? That's my next pursuit.
That's your next one. I know that music was an important part of your home as you were growing up with your father as a cantor, and the fact that until you started school here in the United States, you spoke Russian at home. And you had said that you had gone to the operas and enjoyed La Traviata especially. Could you sing me a few of the chords from there?
Well, I'll sing it just a short one I still remember. This portion has to do when Alfred, the son, is being influenced by a beautiful girl, and he doesn't like the relationship, and the son left home. And then the father sings to him, "Come home." And so it goes something like this: Alfred, Alfred, di damoy, and so forth, you know, come home. And that's what I remember of that.
Wow.
And when I first saw the opera in Russia, Traviata was the first opera that I saw.
So it has stayed with you all
It
this time.
stayed with me all this time.
So it's Come Home,
Come home.
another
Right.
theme.
That's it.
That's right. Well, thank you very much.
Not
I
at all.
appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Who said you couldn't sing?
My father.
Your
said-
father?
My father said I didn't have a voice.
But you do.
Well, he measured it with a tuning fork. As a professional, the one who had the voice in our family, was much to all of our surprise, was my brother. And when he, in his cantorial pursuits, he had choruses, and he had my brother in his chorus, not me.
Well, I think that in a unusual way, you've given voice to many other things.
Right.
So, well, thank you.
Well, I'm glad that I was able to do that.
And to perform. Thank
I didn't
you,
think
Doctor.
that I could perform.
Well, this is a good time for us to take a break.
Okay.
And this is, I mean, we could go on forever on your why questions. We haven't gotten to the where, when, how questions, right?
Okay.
All right. Well, Dr. Bender, at age 92, you have referred to yourself as the oldest living functional endodontist. Tell me what your secret is.
Jeans, not the blue ones. I imagine.
Just jeans?
Just jeans. My father lived to be 90. My grandparents on both sides are long livers. Unfortunately, my brother did not inherit those kind of genes because he died when he was about 78. And we were all attending a birthday party of one of the members of our family in Princeton. And driving back home, driving back with his wife, he said they didn't feel well. And she stopped to take the car, and then he was driving, so they moved over, and she drove him directly into the hospital in New York at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. And he died on the way.
You were very close to your brother.
Oh, yeah, very much so. And also, I try to be close to the children.
Yeah, tell me about your family at large.
Very interesting. My son is a neurologist, and he also is quite an expert in the field of electronics and computers. As a matter of fact, when he was 10 years old, he was building a computer.
Oh, my.
And all the allowances that we gave him, he spent on electrical equipment. And
when was he born?
he was born in, 61. So that would be 1937.
Right. And the first computer was set up at MIT and
No, at the University of Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania was the first computer?
And he just worshipped those two guys. I forget their name by now. At age 92, I can afford to forget.
And your daughter?
My daughter, she is quite a gal in her own right. She is now the executive vice president of the Manhattan School of Music.
Oh,
Before that, she was executive vice president of the Israeli Philharmonic Orchestra.
your father's talents have continued.
Yeah. Anyway, and she has two kids. Now, one of them just graduated 2 years ago, graduated University of Wisconsin. And my grandson, that was her son, is just entering University of Arizona. Why he picked Arizona, I don't know.
Warm. You just wrote a biography, you said,
Yeah.
and so the family members could remember, especially the grandchildren, and now you have a great-grandson,
No, daughter.
granddaughter. So
Yeah, that's my, these are the two, that's the one daughter from my son. She's an attorney. She practices in a small town of York, Pennsylvania. My other granddaughter is now down in Huntsville, Alabama, and she is pursuing her father's footsteps from the field of computers, in that she, her PhD was in artificial intelligence.
it's amazing.
And she's married to a young man who is taking his PhD in optics. So I've invested well, and my greatest investment, of course, is in teaching, getting them to go to school.
Well, it's your mother's pursuit of education,
Yep.
from the railroads to
Yeah.
crossing the oceans.
Right.
The biography must also speak about your feelings about moving and the history, the social history, and documenting all of those wonderful decades and difficult decades.
Well, I my stress is that person be intellectually honest. Most of the, I would say, in the field of biology, most of them are not honest with themselves. They try to manifest the greed of peer recognition. That's what they want. They just want peer recognition. Once they get it, they quit. And I feel that's That's not honest.
Honesty requires the continual pursuit
Right.
of the question.
But I don't have any qualms or differences with people. To each his own. If they like to play cards or like to play golf, okay. I like to go to the library and look around. I can get lost in the library for hours or even for days. That's what I did when I was a kid. Before I came to America, they were looking for me. I was in the library.
You were self-taught.
Right. And when I had certain words that I didn't know, I'd go over to the librarian and ask her. And so I was a regular customer for her.
You had that motivation that came from within.
Right. I guess wanting to know why, you know. And that gives me the greatest sense of attainment.
Well, you have seen dentistry evolve from literally an art to hopefully a
I've
science.
lived the history of dentistry, and particularly endodontics.
What do you see for us in the next century?
Unfortunately, our society is primarily interested in money. And if our society is structured that way, that's the way the dentists are going to be, that's the way the physicians are going to be, and everybody else. Only going to be a few people that are projecting for the future, more constructive, better development, and so forth. And I was asked that question, what do I see in the future? Well, always you have to go back to the past.
Right.
See what the pattern is like, because people don't change. And so I can project in the future. There's too much greed.
Greed in the past and greed in the future?
Greed, that's the way it is.
You had a wonderful statement. I don't know what the specific quote was, but in your past, present, and future lecture, you talked about how those three things are one, the continuum, and that in a scientific article, you have all three, in that you have the background of the past, the findings of the present, and then the discussion, the implications for the future. I thought that was a wonderful way to present it.
The important thing is that the teacher connects the student with the past to give him the inspiration to pursue the future.
It's like an anchor.
That's right. Without that, he doesn't have any sight to pursue.
Yeah. No, I mean, I often think about how we review and return and revisit the same territory over and over again.
It's the same thing, only a little bit more chrome.
That's right. Or more molecular in this case. We are down deeper.
Yeah, that is one of the progresses that we made. We're now thinking in terms of a molecular level.
Right.
Even the anatomists today, they become molecular biologists.
And
that's what they pursue.
You have always, though, in your work from that very early paper, always pursued the most specific, detailed level. And I wanted to mention the fact, the ironic fact that your first paper was on neurology, and your brother's first paper, and he was a neurologist, was on dentistry. Could you say why that happened?
I guess we were very, very close, And I was amazed. I mean, when I started to look at his paper, the first paper, it had to do with an extraction of a tooth. And of course, there was a psychiatric background with it. And the patient pulled her eye out. But it was a fact that she had this infected tooth. And my aspect was that when the patient would chew, his left eye would become red and tear. So, and my brother asked me about that in consultation. I came up to Mount Sinai, and I examined the patient, and I took his dentures out. He was wearing full upper and lower dentures. I said, now move your jaws. Didn't happen. Only when he chewed with the dentures. So then what I did was, after taking the dentures out, I rubbed the nasopalatine area. And sure enough, so there was a pressure there.
There was a pressure point.
That caused that. Of course,
there's the connection.
Question why, but it becomes
it continues.
You know. And we made a colored videotape on that in those days, and I showed it to Lester Burkett, who was our dean at the University of Pennsylvania, and he never gave it back to me.
Oh, that's too bad. That would have gone into the archives.
Yeah.
If you were to identify people that most influenced your personal life, who would those people be?
My wife.
Tell me about her.
She was very perceptive. But, you know, when I'd show her something, I mean, or I'd talk about a particular character that I thought was great and so forth, she would say to me, I wouldn't have too much to do with him. I said, why? I don't know, but that's it.
She had intuition.
Very, very powerful intuition. And so in the beginning, I never bothered listening to her, but after a while, she made that statement, and 100% of the time she was right.
You were a good pair.
Unfortunately, she passed away last year. She had Alzheimer's for 7-8 years. And she couldn't recognize me, she didn't recognize the children, and so forth. And so it was difficult.
A difficult end, but it sounds like you had a strong partnership.
Yeah. But I would say that she and my friend Jake Friedland had a very strong influence on me socially, so forth. Others like Hank Trowbridge, who was the professor of oral pathology at our school. I brought him into endodontics, but he's a very fine person, his wife, and I sort of tried to do things the way he would do them. So he had a strong influence on me. And then there were other people that influenced me on what not to do.
Mm-hmm. Those are important as well.
Right.
I think, as you said, as long as you take the opportunity to learn from what's around you,
right,
you have both positive and negative lessons.
Right, exactly.
Now, what would you say to the young people that are just about to start their careers in dentistry?
Be honest with themselves. and constantly reevaluate and ask the question, why?
I think I've gotten that lesson right now, and I think everybody else has as well. That's a wonderful lesson, and I agree with you. If you were to choose one or three contributions of the many that you've made as the ones you would hold out to tell people about, which would they be?
You mean in my work?
In your work. Well, it could be beyond your work as well, because you've been doing more than your work. I know that.
I would say my bacteremia studies and the bone study are, and this last paper, which should motivate other people to pursue
The next steps.
For example, want to know why the resorption in orthodontics does not recover, whereas the inflammation does recover. I would say that would probably be the three best things that I've contributed.
And if you were to look back on your professional life, are there any parts of it that you would do differently?
Damn right.
What are they?
And constant reevaluation. I would try to present dentistry from a cost-effectiveness basis, because I don't think that dentists that come from the third world countries really are not interested in this extensive fancy dentistry. They have to apply dentistry to their masses, to their people, within the framework of what they can afford.
Right.
Because in the final analysis, dentistry is a cosmetic aspect of what the people want. They want to look good. They want to look pretty.
They want to function.
And they want to function.
Mm-hmm.
But from a health, I don't subscribe to the idea that it's strictly a health program.
Mm-hmm.
I know, of course, it's necessary that to have teeth to be able to chew and function from that standpoint, and also to be able to talk or to sing. But it is not as essential as medicine. I mean, here you're dealing with life itself. This is a peripheral aspect of life, in that just the same, like psychiatry is not as important as neurology.
It's a quality of life issue.
Right. That's right. Exactly. Exactly.
Mm. Now, we're coming to the end of our interview, and I was wondering whether there was anything that you would like to say to the viewing audience.
Yeah. I would like to tell them that the important thing is to have a sense of forgiveness, in that too many of us, or too many societies, have that vengeful feeling, a sense of revenge, or I want to get even with you. That is not constructive. I feel we ought to have a sense of forgiveness. And there is a Hebrew word And the prayers of the important holiday that we have, Yom Kippur, it's called Salachti. Salachti, forgiveness.
Forgiveness. That's important.
So I think that we would be better off, our total society would be better off if we can forgive, and adds more kindness to our life and so forth.
Well, I think that's a wonderful statement. I think it allows us to use our time and energy positively.
Yeah, for example, we have forgiven the Germans in the war, we have forgiven the Japanese and so forth. Now we function better.
Right.
But if
We're
we
able to
had
move
that
forward.
attitude, but I don't see that in our Congress. They still, are anti.
Well, we will have to learn from that
That's
forgiveness approach.
That's right.
Jim Gutman has referred to you as a valued mentor, a respected colleague, and a cherished friend. And to me, that was the most lovely tribute that someone could give, and a triple challenge to everyone that follows you. And
Well, if they do, fine. If they don't, it's all right too.
well, it's been a pleasure for me to have had this time to spend with you and to learn from you as well. And I wanted to thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, to give me the opportunity to express my desires or wishes or whatever.
Well, we will remember to forgive, and we will remember to ask the question, why?
That's right. That's the theme.
That's the theme. It's a wonderful theme. Thank you, Dr. Bender.
Thank you.